Welcome to another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric. Today I am going to share with you the two fibery, fluffy projects that I have been working on. The impromptu fiber prep spin that I did, that I shared the video last weekend on, and my Tour de Fleece fiber prep that I'm hoping will inspire those of you who want to participate this year to start thinking about what you're going to spin. And if you plan to spin along with me, maybe this is something you want to use as your inspiration, or maybe it'll inspire you to some type of theme that works better for you. So let's just go ahead and dive in. I apologize if I have to cough a little bit. It is spring in Virginia, and therefore it is pollen season. So if we go back to my impromptu fiber prep video from last week, I showed you the fiber. I talked about the history of the breed and the kind of the properties of the fiber, but I then immediately got into spinning. The reason I was doing this impromptu spin, though, is that a cousin of mine reached out to me and mentioned that her daughter is really getting into crochet and really enjoying crochet. And I thought it'd be nice to send her a skein of my yarn. And they're both, she and her daughter both are very interested in my spinning and curious about it. But we don't live close enough to get together. So these videos are the closest we get. I thought it would be really nice to put together some crochet yarn. I'm giggling because you'll see what that led to. But one of the things with spinning is that you can get a slightly different yarn based on how you spin your fiber. So most people tend to, well, when we spin fiber, we create a single. So we take the fiber and we turn it into a strand of yarn that is just one strand, and it has twist in it, and you can crochet or knit with it, but it's very fragile. It can unwind and break apart easily. It can draft apart. There's a number of yarns on the market right now, thick yarns, and even some thinner yarns that are singles for people to use. But commercially spun singles of this nature have a tendency to make sure they use fibers that really grip together, and the process that they're going through a little bit felts them. But they are in the market. We spinners actually go out and find them and actually use them as spinning fibers, because you can draft them apart, pull them apart, and spin them finer. So while a single can be used, and as I will talk about here in a minute, weavers like singles because you don't need the same twist type ratio in order for it to stay together, because you're going to pack those singles one after another. And I remember when I was first starting with spinning, I heard a number of people say, oh, you can't, nobody can weave with singles because they break apart. But people wove with singles all the time. You just have to make sure when you're making the single that it has enough twist to hold up to the wear and tear you're going to put on it. And that can sometimes mean it's slightly over twisted. You also benefit from using longer strands, longer length of fiber. So a wool that is a longer staple length works much better because you have less areas for it to draft apart. So certainly you can spin singles and knit with singles and crochet with singles and certainly weave with singles. But the yarn can be a little more finicky, especially in knit and crochet, where we are, as we wrap the yarn around the hook or around the needle, we can be either adding twist or actually removing twist from our fiber because we're twisting the yarn over the needle. With weaving, you're not doing that. You're not, even though you'll have an up and down of the weaving as it goes over and under the long warp threads, you're not getting twist. You're not intentionally twisting the fiber to get it to lay in between the other fibers. Whereas with crochet and knitting, you are wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. You're wrapping the yarn around a hook, and so you're either adding twist or removing twist. And there are some wonderful books and wonderful articles out there on spinning for knit versus crochet. They are better at explaining it than I would be in front of this camera right now. But I will put up a chart here to show the two basic combinations of twist, where you have one strand or you have the strands of fibers, the singles, spun in either an S direction or a Z direction. And all that means is that when you look at the angle of the twist in the yarn, it's either going to go this way or go this way, looking more like a Z or an S, the letter, the length. So I will show it again as the chart here because it's so much easier to see the chart than for me to explain it. What I will explain is that it is a matter of, do I do the singles counterclockwise on the spinning wheel, or clockwise on the spinning wheel? And years ago, when I first started spinning, I didn't research, techniques. I learned by doing. And so a little while into my spinning time, I had somebody say, well, you're spinning backwards. It appears that I was spinning for a crochet yarn, not a knitting yarn. Now, for me, because of my tension issues, and those of you who have watched my videos know I have tension issues, so I will never have a really beautifully perfected, professional looking knitted or crocheted garment because my tension it's just all over the place. And I accept that as part of my journey. So I work that into my final product. When I make things, knowing what my own limitations are, I try to use them rather than try to hide them. So, for me, the difference between a crochet yarn and a knitted yarn, for the most part, is too minuscule for it to be a problem for me. But when my cousin said that her daughter was crocheting, I thought it'd be really lovely to send her some of my yarn. A little bit of backstory. My cousin and I share a great-grandfather. Our grandfathers are brothers, mine being one of the oldest of the 7 siblings and hers being one of the youngest of the 7 siblings. And I've talked about this this family line. If you have watched my videos and you've seen me show you my great-grandmother's chair, this is the great-grandparents that we share. My cousin and I grew up just across the field from each other. Her grandfather was beef cattle, my grandfather was dairy cattle, but her dad came and worked for my grandfather. And so I grew up with her dad just being like a big older brother. And when she came along and her brothers and sisters, I babysat, at least for the older ones. And so we grew up kind of side by side, but there's about 7 years difference between our ages. And the main difference is that I grew up completely at my grandmother's knee, where she grew up much more into what her dad and my granddad and her granddad were all passionate about, which is baseball and softball. So, while I grew up with all the knitting and crocheting and quilting, she grew up with the much more getting out in the sun, being active, and that's what our children have learned as well. So I was just tickled that her daughter was had taken up crochet and was doing crochet, but I don't know what she crochets. And for those of you that crochet or knit, you know, there are so many variations. And with crochet especially, there's a big difference between crocheting amigurumi stuffed animals, little stuffies, you know, fluffy animal, you know, fluffy toys, and crocheting clothing. There's a difference between crocheting clothing and crocheting housewares. There's so many different ways crochet is used, and therefore so many different types of crochet yarn. Whereas with knitting, our yarn is a little more universal. Yes, we have very fine and we have very chunky, but it is a little bit, more universal in its use. Whereas with crochet, you will get entire ranges of crochet threads and yarns that we would just, you know, they just work really well for crochet, but they don't cross over into knitting. Not well. When I think of the doilies that my grandmother made, yeah, I'm not going to be knitting much, although I do know there are people who do knit with crochet cotton. It is not something I do. So I wanted to make a yarn that was a fairly universal yarn for crochet and highlight this whole twist difference. And what I ended up doing is developing that. I wanted to go with a barber pole in this case because it would show the angle of the twist really well. But when it came time for me to spin, and it's a 4-ply, this is a 4-ply yarn, and I know that somewhere here on the video, I will be telling you how many yards, because once again, I forgot to count, and what the wraps per inch, you know, is for it. But this is, this turned out really as I had hoped. I did a 4-ply because this fiber spins so thin. I thought for a good stable crochet yarn that was in the DK to worsted weight thickness, that I would do a 4-ply, and I did 1-ply teal, 1-ply yellow, and 2 of the plies white, undyed. I left in the neps. This is a fiber, Targhee Deboulet is a fiber that if I wanted it less rustic and much more of a fine, refined yarn, I would prep it as I have. I flicked it open, I ran it through the drum carder, but then I would take it to my combs and I would comb it and pull off, diz off the strands, the clean, net-free strands of the fiber, and spin it. I would spin it with a long draw, so it is a woolen spin, but using a worsted prep, because I would use the combs to remove all of the second cuts, all of the little bits, the broken bits, the fluffy bits, the tiny little short pieces that form neps. So let me pull this up here. You might be able to see there are lumps and bumps, and I just left them in this case. It makes it more rustic. It's squishy. It's lovely. It was a wonderful spin. Definitely a fiber that you want to have the lanolin removed from. It makes it much easier to work with. So it has lumps and bumps. It's very rustic, but it should crochet up extremely well. It's fluffy. Unlike the Coriadel that I talked about in my last video, it doesn't go whoop when the water hits it. It does fluff, but this stuff spins so fine that this is the fluffed up version. But there is 4 plies. There's a good, here we go, all the way up, a good twist to it. And so I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do it to help show the crochet spin versus the knit spin. When I started spinning this, I grabbed some of the white and I started spinning, spun up that whole section, started working on the teal, and then thought, oh my goodness, I have forgotten. I'm supposed to be spinning this counterclockwise and then plying it clockwise. So I put aside that first bobbin. I hadn't spun enough of the teal for it to affect my overall spin. So I just started over and I ended up just going and getting another section of white and spinning the 4 plies all counterclockwise. Then I took it to the wheel and plied it clockwise. And what that does is it creates, when you spin the fiber one direction and then ply it the other direction, the singles want to walk together as the twist wraps around itself. Okay? And then you get a good strong yarn. So that's what I was aiming for. A 4 ply that's a good strong yarn. Well, what was I going to do with that other bobbin of singles? And I thought, well, I'll just ply it with a single that, that I already have. And I'll be able to show how it twists the angle of the twist is the other direction, because I'll do this knit. So I went and grabbed some old storage bobbins that I had with some singles on it, and I plied it up. And because these bobbins were the fiber on it was sold, the twist had relaxed. So I couldn't really feel that I was spinning it the wrong way for those singles until I got to the last color, because I was trying to use up, it's remnants. But back in those early days of spinning, when I didn't know the rules, when I didn't read the instructions, when I didn't really care, I was spinning counterclockwise and plying clockwise all the time. And all this fiber that I spun up to do a weaving project for my daughter as singles, and they're very stable singles because I used Coriadel Lincoln. It had a long staple length, and I put a lot of twist in it. Not that most of the strands you could see that with. When I plied an S twist with a Z twist, one of the fibers was going to over twist. In this case, it was the old colored. And I have multicolors because I was really trying to use up, remnants. So by the time I got to the third bobbin, though, which I could see was over twisted, I started having a problem where I was feeling a ton of over twist. And it was about that point I thought to myself, I bet that those singles are spun the opposite way of what I thought. So I have a very, very energetic yarn. The leftover of the white, when plied back on itself, ended up being very lovely, a very balanced yarn. Okay. So there was nothing wrong with my singles, except for the fact that they shouldn't have been plied to each other. But look at the fun textured yarn that it has created. And there's nothing wrong with spinning this. This is actually done on purpose at times. I may, when this video is done, take it back to the wheel, go get another one of the leftover singles, and ply it again, going the other direction, so that the colored yarns have less twist, and the white is the only one that's over twisted. I may go do that just to see what would happen, because it'd be a fun experiment. And if I do that, I'll share the finished yarn at the end of the video and on Instagram. But sometimes the oops is exactly what you want. And there are some lovely books out there on spinning, and there's one actually specifically dedicated. I'll put links in my description below to some of the spinning books that I would recommend. So if you want to check that out. But there is actually spinning techniques that you create something like this on purpose. And I would recommend you looking into those books, looking into the articles that you can find on it, because the people who talk about them and write up the descriptions and explain and have all the pictures, they do it so well. It is so much better than for me to try to explain it. So if you're curious about this, curious about knowing more about crochet yarn versus knit yarn, I highly recommend you look into some of these spinning books. Check them out from your library if they're available. I know that most of them are available on Kindle as opposed to a hard copy. If that's more available to you or you find it easier or less expensive, I recommend that. I get no promotion from any of them. But I do recommend it. It is a very interesting thing to look into, to delve into. The different types of yarns that we create, that we can create, and why we create them. As I said, I had these singles left over. They are singles from a weaving project that my daughter did years ago. And they are spun to remain as a single to be woven. Because unlike with knit and crochet, when you're weaving, the fibers are just going over and under. Okay, they lie with the other fibers. Whereas with crochet, we are intentionally putting in twist. When we wrap the yarn over the needle or over the crochet hook, we are adding, or depending on how the yarn is spun, removing twist to the fiber. And that is why having a multi-plied yarn works so much better, because even if we are removing twist, because it's plied and has two twists going against each other, it's going to stay together much more consistently than if it's just a single that only has one twist direction. Because when we take two yarns that are spun the same direction, okay? So they're going the same direction. So all their twist is going the same direction. But then when we put it in the wheel and ply them together, so they're going the same direction. So let's say like this, we go to the wheel and we ply them together, that opposite force of direction causes those fibers to wrap around each other and stay wrapped around. And that's how you get that nice angled. And if it is, and you can have it to where it's not as dramatic of an angle. It can be more of a flat angle. You can have a loose twist. You can have a tight twist. You can have an over-energetic where there's a lot more twist going one direction than the other. Or you can have, like what I've done, where the two singles have twists that go in opposite directions. And one of them is going to over-twist, and one of them is going to under-twist, or be balanced, I guess you could say. You're going to have crazy. And there's a purpose to all of that. So I suggest, if you're interested in any of this, go and look at these books. These are people who have had years of experience, but most importantly, they have the benefit of editing. The written word has the benefit of editing, whereas the video word, I don't try to edit out the oopses. So, because I have been trying to remember all of this stuff, I now can't remember any of what I've covered. So hopefully it's all covered. And I do know I will go, as I go in and prepare this video, I will put in things like yardage and wraps per inch and all the things, the charts and stuff that that may make this less confusing and more informative. But let's move on quickly to the Tour de Fleece fiber. So, Tour de Fleece, for those of you who may not know, who have not followed my channel long enough to hear me talk about it or watch me spin through it. Tour de Fleece is a month-long spinning event that follows the dates and the course of the Tour de France cycling race. And some people are really big into the cycling, and some people like me, well, we follow the cycling just enough, but for the most part, it's just a fun month of spinning. However, because I also now help with the Ravelry event, and there is a Ravelry group that does Tour de Fleece. You can find Tour de Fleece on Facebook. You can find Tour de Fleece. I believe there's a Discord Tour de Fleece, possibly, maybe. But I participate in the Facebook Tour de Fleece. I'll post in that. But I actually help moderate and administer the Ravelry Tour de Fleece. So I have to get a little bit ahead of the game. I want to think ahead. And also because this year I want to actually do a spin along like I did at Christmas. I want to share the fibers and my theme and my ideas so that if any of you want to try the same thing or just be inspired by what I'm doing, you have time to prepare. So, excuse me. So this year, what I have done, and I will put a chart right here telling you what the colored jerseys of the Tour de France riders mean, because I'm not going to be able to remember them and tell you without jarbling it all up and confusing the situation. So let's just be high tech and put it in writing here. So this year I am going to be inspired by the jerseys that the Tour de France riders wear. And we're going to start with yellow. Now, for even the people who only follow the news, they know that the yellow jersey means the guy that won, or the guy that won, or now that we have the Tour de France Femmes, the women's race, the woman who wins. Yellow means the leader and often the person who then wins because they're leading the last day. But I'm sure that's not always the case. But yellow is the leader of the day, the person who finished the day before's race, the day before's leg of the race, finished first. So yellow represents finishing first, leading the pack. In Tour de Fleece, it can also mean patting yourself on the back, that you've succeeded, you got to the end, you met your goals. So that is my yellow. I went with bold and bright and yellow, and I went with a combination, set the bulk of this down. This fiber is white alpaca that has been dyed yellow. It is there's some silk in it that's been dyed yellow, and it has there we go, here, a fairly decent sized length. This is a CVM that I keep on reserve. It is white. It's a lamb's wool, so it's the first cutting. It is beautifully soft, but a little bit longer staple length than, say, the Targhee deboulet that I was just showing you, that I was spinning. It is next to skin soft, but it's just easy to spin. It's a wonderful length. Okay. I know the sheep that this came from, and I know it was bred to have that combination of the staple length and the softness. This one did not, as the CVM is known to do. It is not a multicolored. It was a pure white. So that is my yellow. I'm really looking forward to it. This is so fluffy. This is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Carded together. Oh, it is just amazing. Amazing fiber. So I have a lot of this. So that will probably be towards the end. I have 4 colors. There's 4 weeks. I may end up saving the yellow and spinning at the end. I may spin it in the beginning. Who knows? I will have more information as to which one I'm going to spin when as we actually get into Tour de Fleece. The second color is the white, and this is alpaca. This is, I'm dropping stuff. This is alpaca. This is silk. Look at that. You can see some of that silk in there. And that Targhee de Boulet that I just spun here. When this was carded together, yes, there is still the neps that the Targhee de Boulet had with it. But when I carded this together, putting that Targhee de Boulet with the alpaca, the air, it's like carding air, and that silk, it became a cloud. And now then it just, it was all I could do to not start spinning this the other day and instead spin my project. It is a cloud of softness. This is luscious, but I can feel that CVM, that specific CVM, even though it is next to skin, baby soft, wonderful, it is not the utter mini micron softness that Targhee has with it here. This this is a cloud. This is a cloud with a little texture, a little flair. This is a cloud. So there's the white. We also have a green jersey. This, for those of you who participate in my Vlogmas spin along, this is some merino roving that I used to exhaust my greens. There were some of my green dyes from my green spin for Vlogmas 2022. There were some of my dyes that hadn't fully exhausted. I hadn't used all of it up. So I used this hank of merino to suck up all the leftover dye. So that's going to be my green. And there's a touch of yellow. So I think this is a fabulous Tour de Fleece hank. So I had this sitting around trying to figure out what to do with it. And when I thought, let's do the colors of the jersey this year, that's what I went with. So I've now dealt with the yellow, the white, and the green jerseys. But there is another jersey. There's a 4th jersey. And this one is giving me a real challenge. There is a polka dot, a red polka dot on a white base jersey. And I'm not sure how to spin polka dot, but what I have prepared is silk. Silk neps, the little leftover waste pieces that are taken off the silk when you are trying to create silk, silk sliver, silk sliver. I've heard it pronounced both ways. This is the waste. This can be carded into a fiber and have little specks of red. But it's little specks of red, not, there's something gummy in there. Let's just get rid of that. That's a piece of waste we don't want. Okay. It's little specks of red, not big polka dots. So I dyed both of these the same red. There's a different intensity. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to spin it. I'm really, because when you spin a single with a single, as you can see with this, you get barber pole, okay? And that's not really reading polka dots. So this is going to be, I guess, my challenge fiber and my mystery fiber during Tour de Fleece. This is the fiber that I have to figure out what I'm going to do. So this will be my challenge fiber. So there are, in Tour de Fleece and like with Tour de France, there are challenge days, there are rest days. I am going to try to have a video for each of the days. If it's a rest day, I'm going to try to have video from outside, maybe hearing the birds sing. Unlike with the spin along that I did for Vlogmas, I can't calculate as much how much I'm spinning every day, because with that I had little tufts of fiber that I was spinning that I knew took me about 15 minutes to spin. So I was able to calculate and keep the videos about the same length. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that part, so you're just going to have to tune in and see. But I do know I am going to try to spin or try to do a video every day for July. It was kind of fun to do it in December. We're going to try to do it for July because I know that when you are in the Southern Hemisphere, it's winter and it's a good knitting and spinning and creative time. And so I figure I should have a spin along for the Southern Hemisphere as well as the Northern Hemisphere around Christmas time. So that's my mindset. That's what I'm going to try to do. It will be an interesting goal, to say the least. There are things going on already planned that may interfere, but my goal, my challenge for myself is to do this. And if you would like to join me in July to spin as much or as little, to spin at no spin, but just to knit or crochet or do needlepoint along with me, then look forward to that. But my theme this year is the Tour de France jerseys. If you are not interested in all 4 colors, if you're not interested in any of the 4 colors, spin what you want to spin, knit what you want to knit. But that is my inspiration. So a way to maybe take that is maybe you have a favorite clothing item, or maybe you have a favorite textile item that you love and you want to see about spinning to replicate the colors, to coordinate. That would be a fabulous spin. But I have to tell you, I do love a good yellow, and I think I have created a winning, see what I did there? A winning yellow this year. So that is my video. I had one last quick message that I wanted to share with you before I wrap up, and I know I'm going a little bit longer. But yesterday, I got out and went and joined a stitching group. They are open to knitting, they are open to crochet, to needlepoint. If it's something you can bring to the library and sit and enjoy the company of other people, then you're welcome. And I wanted to share this because those of you who know that I struggle with social anxiety as well as a few other things know that to go out, even to do something I love, it takes courage. And I wanted to share with you that I took the courage, and yes, it did cause me to be a little stressed, to say the least. But it was worth it, because when you find, and sometimes you have to look around, when you find a group that you feel comfortable with, even if you're having the side effects that you may encounter, like I did, when you find a group that you're comfortable with, that their objective matches yours, it is like this yellow. It is the winning combination. I felt all the anxieties, all the stress, all the worries, all the after effects that I expected, but I still, under all of that, felt welcomed, felt comfortable, felt like I was with other like-minded people, who shared a passion for all of these things that bring us joy, all of these wonderful handcrafts that help us for a little time during the day unwind. And that is something I have been seeking since I've moved here. I've come close a couple times, but never quite the way I felt yesterday. And because it felt so different and so wonderful, oh yeah, that triggered all sorts of bells and whistles in my brain, and it was an exhausting day. And it's why this video may be taking a little bit longer, and I have to use lots of charts and pictures and edit in the stuff that I leave out. But I wanted to share that joy with you, because when you are able to find a place that you can share your own joy of living, you receive equal amount of that joy. And whether it is through a vlog, whether it is through a video chat with someone, whether it is through a long distance friendship with a cousin, a friend from school, a family member that is more distant, but we have that connection, it brings us joy. But when we are able to actually sit down in the same room with someone and have that chaos of being in the room with someone, there is an extra special joy with that. And I encourage you, if it is at all possible, for you to seek out these kind of interactions. They may not be something that happens every week. They may not be even something that happens every month. But it is worth the resulting emotional exhaustion, physical exhaustion, whatever comes. It is worth it to step out of that comfort zone and find other like-minded people. Or to step out of the comfort zone and go to a fiber fair or a festival in your area. Yes, it can have the side effects, and I'm feeling them today, but it's worth it. And I felt yesterday that it wasn't honest of me to come to you in a video if I didn't do exactly the thing I encourage you every time to do. So I did that. And I'm so glad I did. So thank you, every single one of you that have watched to the end of this video, who support me whenever the videos come out by watching them, watching a portion of them, clicking like, subscribing to my channel, making a comment. I thank every single one of you, because it is you that gives me the confidence to step out of my comfort zone and try something different, to try something different and to challenge myself with something unknown. So thank you. You help me have a much more joy-filled life. So I hope you've had a wonderful time unwinding with fiber and fabric today. Until the next video, blessings.